right. So it's April 19th, 2026, and I'm interviewing Lindsay Rubia Garcia. Good morning to you, ma'am. And
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Um, can like you please tell me what district that you are a congressional candidate for the fifth district? Excuse me, I'm kind of nervous here. For the fifth district of Louisiana. Tell me about the makeup and how and the makeup of District 5 and the culture and everything where you reside.
Well, number one, don't be nervous. I know that's easier said than done, but you're out here doing the Lord's work on here on the Sunday morning, putting together these interviews and being patient as I'm trying to work through this schedule and get adjusted. So
Right.
don't be nervous in any way, shape, form, or fashion. At least not in my regard. You and I
Hmm.
are just going to have a conversation.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
as far as District 5, so I am running for U.S. Congress for Congressional District 5. As far as the physical geography of the district, it spans all the way up north in East West Carroll, from Morehouse all the way down through Madison, Franklin, Catahoula, Concordia, and then cuts over and starts heading east towards like West Feliciana, East Feliciana. Got half of Livingston, parts of EBR, Tangipahoa, and Washington Parish. So it basically, I've been telling folks, like, from the geography standpoint of it, if you
Uh-huh.
just imagine the little 90-degree like line between Louisiana and Mississippi, it's basically every parish that touches the border between Louisiana and Mississippi, going from the tippity top north all the way over to the West Florida parishes. The culture, I've been out here maybe about five years actually living here, but I was out here 10 years ago. I already had a significant social media platform when the floods of 2016 had happened.
Hmm.
And somebody had even commented on the video that went viral this week, my speaking at the Louisiana legislature. And they were like, I remember when you came out here in a Penske truck. And I did back in 2016. We did food drives and clothing drives and things like that for those who were impacted in EBR and Livingston Parish. So I've been connected to this particular community for over 10 years. Primarily, it's 14,000 square miles, so it's really extensive as far as its geography of it all.
Okay.
And it goes, but it's like 50 something people. I want to say 51, 52 people per square mile, about 750,000 people. Um, a lot, obviously, with that kind of square mileage and land that they're covering. A lot of that is rural lands outside of the big spaces like Monroe, and urban areas like Monroe and Baton Rouge, and then getting over to like the Bogalusa area.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm familiar with you. There's a few videos of you on YouTube and on other social media platforms, but
Mhm.
I'll talk to you about that later on how I knew of you. Um, since there was a Supreme Court case, I forgot the name of it, talking about the Voting Rights Act of um, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and it's in danger of people of people who are of the African American, other minority groups losing their voting rights. What is your opinion on that? I forgot the court the
It's
name.
Calais versus Louisiana is one I
Right,
think you're thinking about. But
right.
that is
That's the one.
yeah. So I just graduated, and that's why I moved out here. I graduated from the Southern University just last May, and that's an integral part of Louisiana, and really across the country, and particularly District 5, are suffering from voter suppression. not just voter apathy and not having the quality candidates, but voter suppression. And this is just another tactic. So the original case was Robinson versus Ardoin. And I mentioned law school because when I was in law school, I took classes with Ernest Johnson and Judge Janice Clark and voting rights litigation. So I'm very much well abreast of the Robinson versus Ardoin. And then once the Supreme Court ruled that it was in violation and we created that second majority minority seat with Cleo Fields, that is how we got this current district where they redrew the lines and they extended, for instance, my district is now so big because it used to just be up in the northeast corridor from like East West Carroll down to Concordia, Catahoula, etc. But now it goes all the way down and then east over to Washington Parish. My opinion is that Jeff Landry and this Louisiana legislature, this is why they pushed the election back. They were hoping, I listened to the oral arguments before the Supreme Court last fall. And it seemed like the judges were a bit skeptical. It's one of the last legs of the Voting Rights Act that they are trying to attack. So I am for the creation of the equal representation and making sure that the voting is not diluted for Black voting power. Considering that this state is 1/3 Black and we have 6 districts, then it makes sense that we have 1/3 of the districts at least offer an opportunity for a majority minority to district and allows for a minority to get elected there. The Calais versus Louisiana was after they redrew these lines. I believe the word that they use in the lawsuit, they don't say it's white voters. They say it's non-African voters in the lawsuit. And that is what is before the Supreme Court right now. And I believe they pushed the elections back in hopes that after they heard oral arguments that the Supreme Court would issue an opinion at the beginning of the year, which would give them time to gerrymander or redraw the districts right before the election. But the Supreme Court made it clear that they weren't going to issue an opinion. So we're currently still on hold for that. And I would imagine that they're going to issue a ruling in June, but that's not going to change the districts as they are currently right now. When they redrew the districts, they drew Livingston Parish, including myself, within those districts. So I am in support for the second majority minority seat. But in this district, it's very obvious when you actually look at the lines and where they go in that they cut out Grambling, they cut out Southern, and then they dipped in order to include LSU and then Southeastern and favorable jurisdictions for Republicans. And as a result of that, that's kind of where the quote non-African voters filed their lawsuit of Calais versus Louisiana, and that's what we're currently waiting on, and we're expecting an opinion this summer.
Okay. Now, still on the issue of Louisiana. So when it comes to I hear free feedback. When it comes to education, Louisiana, I want to say it's 37 in when it comes to education. How would you influence, assuming when you're elected, how would you increase education, the value of education in your district, in the state of Louisiana?
Well, my background is a teacher. I started off as a teacher, teaching within the same 4-mile radius of Algiers and New Orleans that primarily raised me. Educational opportunities are a big deal, especially when we're dealing with a district that some parishes can't, still to this moment, a significant amount do not even have broadband access. So that's one of the biggest things, especially as we learned during COVID. We need to have access for our students to be able to access broadband services if we're doing at-home days, remote learning, and things like that. So one of the biggest things that I'm pushing for, and it's not just education, but it's also telehealth for people, considering we're closing down rural hospitals as a result of the legislation, the big beautiful bill, and the cutbacks on Medicaid. So the broadband access is multifold, is definitely with the education component, but also with the telehealth for those who can't drive or don't have access to be able to drive an hour or so to go be seen in a clinic. Education is obviously a big component for myself. Property ownership and education are two of the biggest factors to raise people out of poverty. And this district is suffering with poverty. It's the poorest in the state. For myself, it is absolutely integral that we not just create the educational opportunities, but that we also have meaningful job opportunities. And growing up in Louisiana, having friends literally all over the state, including in District 5, the issue is that I see, and that kind of breaks my heart, is that people, they get their education and they feel like they have to leave Louisiana, that they can't stay here. We have significant poverty rates. I want to say it was 23%. And
yeah, but according to my findings, it says Louisiana is second out of the nation when it comes to poverty.
mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask you that question, but go ahead. I'm sorry, you was in the middle of something. So
No, you're good. But we also have a teacher vacancy shortage. And I think a lot of that has to deal with the same thing that I'm talking about. People are graduating and getting an education, but they're not staying in the state. So they're not becoming teachers. And it has to deal a lot with the teacher pay issue. We even have an amendment that's coming up that is being proposed and propagated as it's a teacher pay raise. But at the end of the day, it's really not. It's just paying down the teacher loan debt and hoping that the jurisdictions will turn around and say, yeah, we have this extra money. We're going to go ahead and increase teacher pay. So we have over 2,000 teacher vacancies in the district and across the state that we need to fill and touch up on. And again, if it's an issue of schools, if it's an issue of getting access to schools, even homeschooling, remote learning, you need broadband in order to do that. You need roads in order to do that. We have a backlog of over 24 billion right now in roads and getting those open and up to par. Education is obviously a big component of my campaign and a big component of just who I am personally as a former educator who taught history for 10 years.
okay, and next question, when it comes to criminal justice and law enforcement and safety, it says Louisiana is the least safest state in 2025. 519.8 among 100,000 residents. How would you go after or tackle the issue of crime and issues like that, crime and law enforcement and law? How would you tackle on that?
I don't think it's. I will say that targeted enforcement and system reform, it's not just more arrests. I feel like, as I said before, the biggest issue and the biggest pull towards crime is this poverty element. I tend to believe that people who are educated, people who have good jobs, etc., are not going out and performing these crimes. In my time in the classroom, in conversations with our kids, it's kind of like, well, and to not at the risk of sounding corny, I read Sir Thomas More, and he says, if you suffer your people to be ill-educated and their manners are corrupted from infancy, and then you punish them for having acted upon that which their education first disposed of them, what is to be concluded that you first created the criminals only to punish them? So the biggest thing for me is that I feel that this state underinvests in its people. We underinvest. We have a poverty issue, and that is directly correlated to crime. So if you want to address the crime issue, then we need to address the poverty issue, because this is the biggest pull towards criminal activity, is the fact that people are poor. People do not have good paying jobs, or they're literally working. I mean, half the district is living above the federal poverty level, and what's called the Alice threshold, which is they're asset limited but income constrained and employed. So they are working, but because we refuse to increase the livable wages, like here in Louisiana or at the federal level, this means that people are working and busting butt, but they're not bringing home in order to take care of themselves, and they have to work, have side hustles or side jobs, and things like that. So I know that during 2020 and 2021, the phrase was defund the police, and it's not for myself an issue of it was thwarted that way, but it's not defund the police, it's refund the community. It's investing into education, it's investing into vocational schools, because not every child is meant to go to college, and they don't need to. I have 8 older brothers, and one of them makes like $500,000 by, refurbishing tubs. It's decent, honest work. We're talking about HVAC. We're talking about mechanics. We're talking about maritime, because we are a river state and whatnot. But it's the mentorship programs, the vocational schools, the recreational facilities and parks and things like that is a big thing for me, because you can't, as Thomas More said, you can't suffer your people to be ill-educated. And then it gives the impression that you are creating these criminals just to punish them. And when we're living in the incarceration capital of the country, yeah, it kind of tracks that you're pro-life, but you're really pro-birth, because it feels like you want to you're neglecting all of the things that would pull people out of poverty, which is education, which is jobs and access to good paying jobs and healthcare and things like that. So that's, for myself, is refunding the community, not defunding the police, but refunding the community by way of educational opportunities, fixing the teacher shortage, while addressing the broadband and the roads, while creating the avenues that our children can actually go out and participate in recreational activities, because an idle mind is a devil's playground, right? So if you
Right.
give them absolutely nothing else to do, that kids, I know myself, I will get into mischief, and I did, because if I don't have these opportunities, that's what I'm going to be spending with my time. And then mentorship programs, like I said, to give these our children and our youth and even college level students somebody to look up to, somebody to call whenever they have questions, which is something that I struggle with in trying to find a mentor and somebody that will kind of look over me and somebody I can call when I have questions, etc. And then the vocational schools, which is a big thing for me. I really want a vocational or a tech school, if possible, in every parish within the district, so that we have alternative pathways to adulthood, where you can choose if you want to do military, if you want to do the traditional and going into college, or if you want to get into some kind of trade. And you make that decision, and then you have an education plan and a mentor and recreational facilities in order to get you there.
Okay. Uh, so you said a lot, and there was some things I want to go in, but I have a question. Oh, well, I'm gonna ask this other question because I had a list on the phone. I'm gonna ask you about. So you was involved with Black Lives Matter about 10 years ago. Am I right? Am I correct?
I will say, and you got to be more specific. Are we talking about the statement that Black Lives Matter, or the organization?
The organization.
I have no affiliations directly with Black Lives Matter, the organization. What I do have is an awakening of sorts to what that movement was trying to say, what the words itself tried to say. And that's my connection to the movement, is really the words that Black Lives Matter. And that came about, about 10 years ago, whenever I went viral but it was also a result of conversations that I had with students in my classroom, which were, you know, at the time with Trayvon Martin, and then Tamir Rice came about and happened, the murder of him. And that was, Tamir Rice was the same age as my students that I was teaching at the time. And direct affiliation with the organization, no, don't have any direct affiliation. But given that I teach and I taught 10 years in predominantly Black schools in New Orleans, it was just the consequence of conversations that I had, and more importantly, as a historian, and then the track record of, for instance, what happened with Tamir Rice, that there was no accountability for the police officers who shot him, was kind of like the catalyst. My first video that had gone viral was me trying to address the dichotomy between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, which was coming about in response to that, because the reality is all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter too. So it was more so for myself as a statement, because I personally believe that the reason, a good part of the reason why we currently sit in these times, and history is a place of residence and not like it's a place of reference and not residence. We only live here because I feel like we refuse to learn from it and grow from the lessons that should be learned. And myself is, when I think of Black Lives Matter, I think of the fact that the United States as a whole in the 250 years has refused to acknowledge and deal with the ramifications of your first founding document saying, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And then your next founding document is the Constitution. And then in Article 1, Section 2, you delineate Black people as 3/5 of a person. So which is it? Are all men created equal, or are they 3/5 of a human being to be used in chattel slavery? So that's the Black Lives Matter movement and the statement and what that means to me. The organization in and of itself, I've never had any direct affiliation with. Was I present for all the protests? Absolutely, because I was there either as a legal observer or just as a participant to make sure that when the narrative is told, which it has been, that it's going to be told accurately, and you have allies and accomplices, etc., that were on the front ground and front lines and can tell you what it was and what it wasn't from a firsthand perspective, instead of just commentating on the side and from videos that other people are putting up or comments that other people are making, but from people who are actually there at the moment.
And next question is, since you were there at the protests and marches, what is your experience being at protests and marches and advocating for, for Black Lives Matter or any other movement? How was your experience during all of that?
I mean, oh, Jay, I go back. I've had the full gambit. I have had moments where, like, I think back and I see the community coming out and the amount of love and solidarity and, less of a march and more of like a huge block party type vibe, where everybody, they've got tables and they've got information and people are giving out waters and making food and all of that, to the fact that I've had, fractured ribs because I was out in Minneapolis during George Floyd and the curfew, and seeing what the National Guard did, firing on either innocent houses that had nothing to do with what's going on, to like being hit with the bean bags in my chest and fracturing my ribs, to
Ooh.
chemical burns on my throat after Dante Wright because of the amount of pepper fog and tear gas and things like that they dispelled on protesters. My experience, I've had the entire gambit, to be honest. But my overall, when I think back of that moment, it's kind of one of the reasons why I'm running, because I drove ultimately after George Floyd was killed. I drove with my dog Justice over 30,000 miles around the United States. So I was out there when the 3rd precinct was on fire for George Floyd. I was out there in Kenosha after Kyle Rittenhouse shot those 2 folks. I was trapped in the church surrounded by National Guard in Louisville for Breonna Taylor. I was out there in the Bay protesting Facebook and Menlo Park in their own policing system. I mean, I drove from literally sea to shining sea, from Niagara to Tijuana, so that I could see it for myself. Also in DC, whenever they painted Black Lives Matter Plaza, et cetera, et cetera. So the one thing that I will say in as far as the community coming together and more the humbling, almost brings you to tears that we came together, it was in DC, and seeing the love that was actually out there and the solidarity that existed out there, all the way to the violence and the kettling and the like unconstitutional or just unconscionable practices of law enforcement during the trial of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. Because in the middle of that, I was out there in Minneapolis covering that trial at the Hennepin County Courthouse, and they killed Dante Wright, which, like, it was only like a 7 to 10 minute drive from where George Floyd was killed. And that was in Brooklyn Center. And the violence that I saw from police, and that was where Kim Potter confused her gun with the taser.
Right.
And everything just kind of erupted, and it was extremely violent on peaceful protesters. And it was crazy to see, folks infiltrating police officers and whatnot, pretending to be protesters and trying to get into the crowd and trying to get people to go to these places and say, we're all meeting up over here. And then when you head over there, it's like a police stationing thing, almost like they're setting people up to show up to get arrested. Right. I've had a full gambit, you know what I mean? And that's kind of one of the reasons, like I said, that I ran, because in all the thousands of miles, Jay, that I traveled, I never, not once. It's not that I'm not going to say that there wasn't looting, or that there wasn't, I'm hesitant on causing and calling it rioting, because January 6th was rioting. So yeah, and that's the point that I'm making. In all of those 30,000 miles that I drove, you know what I never saw? What I never saw was Black Lives Matter folks, and on that side, getting together in an organized way by the hundreds, let alone by the thousands, and intentionally either storming a state building, or let alone the United States Capitol, and then beating police officers on international television. If anybody can, when they're like, all these violent protesters in BLM, I'm not going to deny that there were things going on, but in a movement like that, you can't control everybody. However, what we saw on January 6th was organized. What we saw on January 6th was intentional. What we saw on January 6th was nothing like when I was out there a couple of months prior when they painted Black Lives Matter, because they had put up a 10-foot black fence the entirety around the White House. And I wish one of us would have shimmied up a drain pipe then, because they had snipers on the roof and National Guard out there for us. So that's kind of a push of why it is that I'm here, because that is the narrative that most often gets, portrayed, is that the BLM movement was violent and it was a bunch of robbing and looting and all that. And that wasn't my experience. What I did see on January 6th, now, that is rioting. That is shimmying up drain pipes. That is building a gallows on the front lawn. That is breaking into and stopping the peaceful transition of power, breaking through windows and then crawling through windows, et cetera, et cetera. So honestly, it was a crazy experience, but it was a crazy time. But that's part of the frustration that I have, is that we did all that. And the two things that the movement really wanted was, the George Floyd Police Reform Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And then we were told by, leadership in the Democratic Party, well, let's just get to November. All right, well, we got to November. And then they're like, let's wait until he gets inaugurated. All right, then you get to January 6th and you're doing that. And then they go ahead and do what they're doing. And then once you take power and you're inaugurated and you have control of Congress, what did the Democrats do? Why did it take 2 years? Well, you didn't deal with the co-conspirators or those who were a part of that insurrection to the point where you let them remain in power, remain in their seats, and then they sat there and objected to the agenda. They objected and held off on us getting the legislation passed. And then they got to help the defense and then sit on the jury for the impeachment trial of Donald Trump. So it's kind of like, yes, I'm a Democrat, but I promise you, Jay, I'm not making any friends over here in the Democratic leadership because I was no party prior to running. I have no
Right.
problem calling a thing a thing.
So are you in favor of going against Jeffries, Chuck
Hakeem
Schumer?
Jeffries and Chuck Schumer's?
Yes. Or
Absolutely. I feel like calling a thing a thing. I think that it's gone entirely too dang far. And I didn't catch felonies. I didn't drive 30,000 miles around the country. I didn't get the broken ribs or and the chemical burns on my throat. I didn't stand in solidarity with my brothers and sisters of all races and classes and zip codes and faiths and all that. I didn't do all that for symbolic. I didn't do all that for you to take a knee. I didn't do all that for you to put on some African garb and then change a street name. We wanted the systemic changes, and the Democratic Party did not fulfill on that. And now we're at a point where this party not only did not fulfill in those promises that we're still waiting on now 5-6 years later, but we're also at a point where you're trying to hold the moral high ground while at the same time accepting APAC money, while at the same time pretending like we didn't live from 2023 into 2024 with the genocide of Gaza on our news feeds. People buried in rubble, and women and men and children and the like, in hospitals and journalists, and we all watch that on our news feed. Now, it seems very, very difficult for you to come in my face and try to pretend like you have the moral high ground when at the same day you're like, well, they have a right to defend themselves. Well, are you trying to say that African apartheid? You're trying to equate legality with morality, and it's not the same thing right now. The people that I have talked to, and more importantly, the responses that I've gotten from my content and the work that I've done on socials, etc., is very much we are tired of the strongly worded letter energy. Like, you're not going to be able to flip tables. You're not going to be able to fight. If it is as bad as it is, then why aren't you acting like it's as bad as it is? And whereas you're trying to bring us back to center and you're trying to bring us back to a normal that doesn't even exist anymore. That normal died on January 6th, 2021. That normal, we are not going back to that normal until you deal with the orange elephant that is literally in the room. And while you're like, well, what are you going to attack him on? I don't know. Pick something. You're sitting here. We had the DNC like last week in New Orleans, and Letitia James was one of the speakers. And I found it to be very ironic that you would have Letitia James come and speak at the DNC, but yet you're worried about what you can charge him on or what you can impeach him on. Whereas Letitia James, this man weaponized the entire DOJ, brought in an attorney from Florida who did like insurance, Lindsay Halligan, and then unconstitutionally appointed her to be the U.S. attorney to go after Letitia James and James Comer over what? The same they went after the Fed chair, Lisa Cook, on trumped up charges that literally they pulled out of nowhere on like mortgage fraud. Like, you're playing chess with pigeons. You're the only ones playing by the rules, trying to bring us back to a normal that no longer exists. My energy is much different. My energy, not only am I the type to buck against, regardless of who you are, because genuinely, like, I am a Democrat, but I am far more. When they're like, "Oh, you're like Jasmine Crockett," I think was the comment, or AOC. I'm like, actually, no, because those beautiful women have more sense than me. To be honest.
Yeah. Down here, it was kind of sad though what they did to Jasmine Crockett. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I followed all of that.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay. Yeah, because I think it was a conflict of interest for the Attorney General of Texas. Now I'm down here in Texas though, right?
Okay.
So I'm in Texas. So so during that primary, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but I'll just say just for the people who you will be hearing this. The Attorney General of Texas blocked voting. He went to the Supreme Court of Texas and blocked the county court to allow people to vote, because there was people still online to vote after 7 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So he went to Dallas County. He went to Williamson County. He went to there's a third county in Texas. I forgot what it went. Yeah, and he stopped people from voting. He's told the people to leave. He shut down the polls down, and that helped lead the Monet for James Tallarico to win the Democratic primary. For that Senate seat, and not her.
Right. And the last minute changing of polling places,
right,
et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I think that's kind of the point that I'm making. You're the only one still playing by the rules. And I've said it in a spoken word piece that I put up several years ago that I just reshared on my Instagram and on my platforms on yesterday, because I feel like I am the consequence. And I told it to the Louisiana legislature. I am the consequences of your actions. I am the reckoning for the choices that you all have made. And I'm putting y'all all on notice, and no different than I said in that spoken word piece. I'm tired of playing chess with pigeons who are knocking over the pieces, shitting on the board, and then strutting around like they want after. You're trying to bring us back to a normal. You're still trying to play by the rules. And while it is commendable and it is admirable, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to reform your way out of fascism. You're not going to, this has to be dealt with. And it should have been dealt with January 7th, 2021, but you didn't. And you dragged it out. And now here he is. He's back. All of his people are back. Everybody who was prosecuted, the billions of dollars that went into prosecuting this and having all these hearings for January 6th, only to have no accountability come out as a result of that. And not only are those defendants now gotten pardons, but we're also talking about removing the charges of those who went to trial and were found guilty of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who we watched on international television literally storm the Capitol and break through the building and run through the state Capitol. Like, that's the type of energy that I'm on, and I think that is, if you look around to the more progressive candidates like myself, it's like, you're talking a good game, and not just Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer's of the world, but I had a direct conversation with Ken Martin, the chair of the DNC, on my first day when the DNC came to New Orleans, and he's asking about policy. And I hit him back with, everybody over here is on the same thing. We want education. We want to tackle affordability. We want to tackle healthcare. We want to tackle infrastructure. We want to tackle all of these big topic issues, including social justice and environmental justice, which is big in this district, considering we have like carbon capture and sequestration, which is crazy in and of itself. Because on one hand, you're going to pass legislation so that people can't sue for the consequences of, can't sue companies and corporations for the consequences of global warming, because global warming doesn't exist, while at the same time, you're giving out billions of dollars in subsidies for carbon capture in order to put all the carbon, liquefied carbon, underneath the ground, because you want, that's your way of helping prevent global warming. You get what I'm saying? It's like, on one hand, you're like, it doesn't even exist, while at the other hand, you're giving out subsidies to help prevent the exploitation and the increasing of carbon and fossil fuels and the carbon in the air. So it's kind of like you're talking out both sides of your mouth. But I had that conversation with Ken Martin, and I wasn't the most polite conversation, because I think he was talking to me still as a candidate, and I'm talking as not just a candidate, but also as a constituent, because I am the broke college student. I am the single mom of 2 kids. I am the educator that's out here. And if you're expecting me to go to the people of District 5 and to sell them pipe dreams on hashtag affordability, and I'm fighting for the people, but I'm not going to give them the mechanism of how in order to accomplish that, you're crazy, because I'm not about to go and lie to these people like they've been lied to, like I feel like I've been lied to for so long. It's not going to happen. We're not going to get the legislation passed that we want until we deal with this administration and the actions of this administration, who is holding up the Epstein class and not the working class and the poor.
And I'm talking about Epstein, and then I heard you mention AIPAC, and I'm glad that you're not taking AIPAC money. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. I'm glad I'm hearing that. Because though of this disastrous, because I'm going to foreign policy, and yeah, let me go to foreign policy. I'll go back to the other issues. Um, what is your plan, assuming if you get elected, to stop funding what's going on in Gaza to the Palestinian people? The Laku Benjamin Netanyahu folks that are in our government, lobbying for more conflicts, and actually what's going on in Iran. Um, how would you? Because I know the House is where most monetary policy begins, is in the House of Representatives. Would you block everything until you get him to stop bombing, supporting the genocide in Palestine and in Israel, and also stop what's going on over there in Iran, in the Persian Gulf?
There are ways to tackle that, like the Foreign Assistance Act, and there are already laws in place. They just need to really be enforced. So the reality of it is that even getting us into Iran and things like that, that we have been funding what is going on in Palestine. And for everybody who is like on the fence and they're like, they have the right to defend themselves. Well, the letter of the law, by the letter of the law, you have the right to use force up until it's no longer a threat. Well, at what
Mm-hmm.
point is there no longer a threat? Because you're bombing hospitals, you're killing off journalists, you're doing targeted strikes and whatnot. We are currently in the middle of a war in Iran. Why? Because Israel was like, we're going to do it, so you might as well hitch your wagon to us. And that, to be honest, is part of the problem, was that we continually give this blank check to Israel, saying that we need these folks, when at the end of the day, Israel has had a history that goes back to JFK, where we want to prevent Iran from getting access to nuclear weapons, but Israel doesn't want to tell the world that they have it. They don't want to sign the non-proliferation agreement. They don't want to adhere to the same international rules that everybody else is, and they're ignoring the calls of the International Criminal Court that is issuing warrants, et cetera, et cetera. We are standing against. America can't sit here and say that, we are the exceptional, and that we are this nation that does the right thing, when in the reality, folks don't want to deal with the fact that a lot of the drugs that are coming in from Central and South America have to do with the federal agencies of the United States going in and performing coups and doing the same thing that they did there, doing the same thing they did in Iran. For instance, I can make the argument the IRGC in Iran, in the current regime, wouldn't have gone as radical as it is had you not done what you did back in the 1950s, when they had a democratically elected leader who wanted to nationalize their own oil, and you didn't like that. So then you did a coup, got rid of him, and put the Shah in power. And he ruled with an iron fist over his people and had the opposition quelled over the next, 20 something years, almost 30 years, until you have the flipping in 1979. And then that's what brought about the Ayatollah and the radical extremism of it. There was a period in time, and people are like, look at what Iran looked like in the 70s, and you see women going around. Yeah, what you see is something that's familiar and culturally significant to you, because it was Americanized, because we had an ally in the Shah, but that's because of oil. That is because of the nation wanted to nationalize their oil and to make sure that they had control of it, and that they could do what they needed and make the money off of their resources for their people. And America didn't like that. So between MI6 and then the CIA, that's when we have the coup that put it, like I said, the Shah in power, who rules over up until you're going and going until the people revolt. And then it pushes it to that far extreme of having the IRGC come to power, because they were tired of American and European influence in their country and dictating the uses of those resources. We have Israel, who has been telling us, like Benjamin Netanyahu and the like, who have been telling us for 30 of the 40 years of my life, because we went into Iraq and Afghanistan when I was in high school, and we just now left. But we went into Iraq and Afghanistan. We went into Iraq even though Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, for weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. And Netanyahu was saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have access. They have nuclear weapons. They have chemical weapons. Yeah. How did Saddam Hussein get those weapons? Because when you lost in the Iranian Revolution, you went to Saddam. You gave Saddam you knew that he had the nuclear capabilities because you gave it to him. You knew that he had the chemical weapons because you gave it to him. Only for you to turn around when he tried to go into Iran and he failed in Iran. Then fast forward 20 years, you're in now early 2000s. Afghanistan hits us. Next thing you know, we're going in for the weapons of mass destruction that we provided.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a double edge. You know what I mean? I am not. I am against Citizens United. I am for getting rid of dark money in politics. I'm sitting here running, and no, I'm not taking APAC money. No, I'm not taking these PACs. I will take PACs, but that's only PACs that I fundamentally agree with, like a LGBTQ caucus or Equality for Forum, Equality in Forum, not corporations, but PACs. I'm not totally against PACs, but I don't have any PAC money to speak of like that, to be honest. My average contribution is at like $27, I think it is, because I don't have big money, like that. A lot of my funding is coming from the people here in Louisiana or people around the United States who are familiar with my background and whatnot. But we, sadly, with Citizens United being what it is and having, unlimited amounts of money going in, it's kind of like, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't around here, because you have to have the people I'm going up against in the Republican side. They have millions of dollars, 4 million for one candidate, for instance, right now. And they have all the PACs and they take all that kind of money. But I have been standing with the Palestinian people long before 2023.
Right.
Long before 2023. And these are my friends. These are people I went to school with. These are people that I've known just out in the community. This has been going on long before October 7th of 2023. And it just came to the forefront of it all. So I not only was never going to, but I definitely, after everything that we've seen at this point in time and the amount of conflicts and control that this country has, considering they have universal health care, they have the ability and education infrastructure that they need. But we can't get that here. We, like Tupac said, we got money for wars, but can't feed the poor out here. That's exactly where I feel like we are. So I feel part of the reason why I'm running right now is, like I said to the Louisiana legislature, I'm the reckoning. I'm the consequences of the choices that you made. And yes, I am a Democrat, but I have been no party my entire political career up to this point. And I'm tired of commentating, even though I align primarily with Democratic policies. My issue is the platform and the mechanisms by which y'all think you're going to be able to accomplish that. And you're not going to be able to accomplish that by playing chess with pigeons. Like I said, you got to flip the whole dang table over, because you need revolution. You don't need reform. You need revolution. You need to get these people out who are propagating these policies for the Epstein class and the like, in order to get there. And that's not unique to me. You listen to Theo Vaughn, you listen to Joe Rogan, you listen to Candace Owens, you listen to all these, for instance, the Republican, quote unquote, not even Republican, but conservative leaning podcast bros and gals. And you're seeing them saying this same exact thing. Whether I agree with these people or not, as a historian, as a lawyer, I can look at things objectively from all sides. And I listen to voices from all over.
Okay.
To formulate my ideas and thoughts like that. And there are plenty of things. For instance, I've been since the killing of Charlie Kirk, I've been heavily listening to Candace Owens and understanding where she is, and listening to the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that tastes like piss and vinegar coming out of my mouth in and of itself, to be honest. But it's not. But that's like, it's not, and I have to be very clear about, I originally was like, I can't believe, in what world am I agreeing with Nick Fuentes? In what world am I agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene? In what world am I agreeing with Candace Owens? And then I have to remind myself, I'm not agreeing with these people. These people are agreeing with us sometimes.
Right. Okay. Now, I you know what? Let me go there. Because you mentioned Candace Owens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Nick Fuentes. Speaking about the Kirk's death, do you think there's something? What she? Do you think there is some evidence in what she's saying that there could be a conspiracy behind his demise? Because now they found that the bullet did not match the the bullet did not match the gun, and there's other stuff like that's going on. I don't know if you're aware.
Oh yeah, I'm aware. Like I said, I've been following Candace Owens. Do I agree with everything she says? No. Do I feel like some of the things she says goes far beyond the pale? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to you. That doesn't mean I'm not going to hear you out, because even I want to understand, and if you can make your logic make sense to me, even if I don't agree with it, all right, cool. At least we're both under a firm understanding as to where it is that we are. And her and I are diametrically opposed on several other issues. But whether and what I do believe in the Charlie Kirk incident, especially because I've spent so much time on the front lines, to whereas I try to explain it to people. I need you to think of like three groups. And on the front lines, it was like BLM folks against the white supremacists, like the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, which were nothing in comparison to the 76ers and the 3%ers and other Boogaloo Boy type groups who are more aggressive on the front lines than even the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers are. But then in the middle of that, you would have the police and then the National Guard, except all of their energy was, even though they tried to keep the peace between BLM and these alt-right groups, but it was more so directed towards BLM. Up like then, despite January 6th happening, now at this point, now we fast forward to this point, and now these same groups, these Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, 76ers, and these alt-right folks are now deputized with ICE badges, CPB badges, BP badges. And now, just like they had a raid out here in Hammond that I pulled up on this weekend on Wednesday, now you have local police officers and excuse me, and National Guard folks who are once again acting as the police for these very same groups, except now it's being done under the color of law. Do I agree, like I said, with everything? Do I believe there could be a conspiracy? I'm saying all that to say that after the Charlie Kirk incident, I was actually really scared. I remember telling the folks on my Patreon that if they don't get a handle on this, the accelerationists are going to win. Now, the accelerationists are a particular faction of the Nick Fuentes and the Groypers group that weren't friends with Charlie Kirk. Like Nick Fuentes and Charlie Kirk used to go at it all the time. And the Nick Fuentes used to challenge Charlie Kirk all the time, and the Groypers and whatnot, which explains Nick Fuentes. There is so much I could say to that man, but to that point, to have him at a point and being like, I vote Democrat, it just really goes to show you that it's really at this point where there's so much going on. I don't, even if I do agree with you, even if you want to come over here on this side, you go ahead, but you're going to sit way over there, because where I can see you and keep your hands on the table, because I don't trust you like that, because you've said too much, you've done too much, that it almost feels like controlled chaos, to the point of, what are you going to do after Donald Trump takes power? Are you going to be defending these policies? Nah, because not even your base is down for it. Not even your base is on that kick, and they're pissed at the policies as well. So it makes sense for you to kind of act as this voice of opposition than it is to agree with the policies that are hurting your base and the people who follow you, because otherwise it feels like you're out of touch. But the accelerationists wanted that. I was afraid after Charlie Kirk that they were going to, you already started to see the alt-right rallies. You already started to see them come together. And I was really afraid at that point. They want all-out anarchy. And now that half of these people didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was before his death. And now all of a sudden you're hosting these alt-right rallies, and now you're being more emboldened than ever. So I was actually really afraid that the accelerationists were going to get a leg up. And whether I don't have enough evidence, that's one of the reasons why I want to be in Congress, and I want to get like on the Judiciary Committee, so that way we can bring these agencies forward. Because I got a couple of questions about Charlie Kirk and the murder of Charlie Kirk. I have some questions about the DOJ and their handling of things, not just on that angle, but also for the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, et cetera, et cetera. I don't, even if I listen to them and I understand where it is that they're coming from, do I believe everything that they say? Nah, some things are beyond the pale, and I don't agree with everything that they say, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to hear them out and listen and feel like, okay, well, you kind of got a point right there. And if it is, I'm going to tell you, you're right when you're right. And that's on that.
All right. Here's a question I want to ask because one of my supporters want to ask this question. So she said, what would you do to protect women's health rights with their doctors and protect doctors who want to give women life-saving procedures, DNC, or even abortions if needed?
Well, you're talking to somebody who has had DNCs because I have miscarried and lost children. And you're talking to somebody who has had to make the difficult decision of terminating pregnancies. So at that point in time, my conversation is very, very simple. That decision is to be made between myself, my husband at the time when we had to make that call, my faith, and my doctor. It's not for the state to decide. And I think that there is a very big misunderstanding, and it's a lack of, our people suffer from a lack of education and lack of knowledge, because at the end of the day, the argument is that it's being that Dobbs, which overturned Roe, that had been the law of the land for 50 years, although we never codified it, which is number one. So number one is codifying Roe, and having a woman's right to choose in legislation on the record, therefore not to be overturned and at the whim of whoever is on the Supreme Court. That's number one. And then number two, I don't think that people understand that all of the privacy rights that are entangled within that. Because if you read the opinion of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, you read Clarence Thomas and he attacks everything except loving, which is interracial marriages. I wonder why. He attacks everything except loving, which he is in an interracial marriage. So I found that to be interesting. But we're talking about Obergefell and same-sex marriage, et cetera, et cetera. So it extends beyond just a woman's right to choose. So codifying Roe, enshrining these rights as they are, and keeping the state out of these decisions and out of my bedroom, to be honest. So it goes beyond for myself just the rights of women to make these decisions and life-saving measures, et cetera, et cetera. And I posited this when I was before the entire state party, and there were several gentlemen in the room, and I'm the baby of a baby of 10 with 8 older brothers, not to mention I'm raising a son to be a man. So how would you feel if I passed some legislation that said that you had to have mandatory vasectomies? They're reversible. You know what I mean? And when you decide to have children, you could go in and fix that up. But you can't say that you're pro-life when at the end of the day, you're not providing education. You're not providing livable wages. You're not fixing the foster care or the adoption process. You don't want to even provide the health care for these children. Donald Trump just said last week, we don't have, with all the war the war in Iran, we don't have the money for we don't have the money for daycare. You know what I mean? So more importantly, you're so pro-life that you're pro-death, because if a woman goes and has an abortion, then all of a sudden you're so pro-life that you're pro her death if she goes and gets it in order to do it. And the biggest issue is the lack of knowledge, because when people are like, it didn't reverse Roe, all it did was push it back to the state. Beloved, what Roe said was, and they don't understand what the state means. The state can be in reference to the federal government. It can be in reference to the state localities and the state governments. So whenever you're like, oh, it goes down to the state. No, Roe said the state, whether that be federal or state, has no right in a woman's right to choose up to viability, period, point blank, end of story. So when you reverse that and you're like, well, we're pushing it down to the state, it's not just about returning it to the states. You are allowing the state, whether federal or state governments, to dictate what a woman's right is. And therein lies the problem for me, because let's be honest, Jay, you're a man, you are allowed to have children, and you can impregnate multiple women in the same day. multiple across the board. Genghis Khan had thousands of children. A significant population of the world today can trace their lineage back to Genghis Khan because he is allowed basically almost to produce and to have children from womb until the tomb. And at this point, as a woman, I only have a certain period of time that I can even have children, from the time I hit puberty until the time I hit menopause. Yet all the legislation is about preventing me from having or wanting me to have children, or the legislation is all on the woman and not on the man, despite the fact that you can have more children than me. I can only gestate a body inside of me once a year at most. But yet you can impregnate multiple women every single day, going on, doesn't stop. You can do it all the time, except there's nothing there for you. And more importantly, you want to stop unwanted pregnancies, but you don't want people to terminate pregnancies, but you don't want to do anything to stop unwanted pregnancies. You don't want access to healthcare. You don't want access to birth control. You don't want access to education. So my stance is codifying Roe, codifying the different the privacy rights that come along that were enshrined, that will be next up on the topic, which yes, includes same-sex marriage. That Clarence Thomas said it. He said it himself. Pretty much everything outside of loving is up for the table, because if you flip this, everything's out there.
Yeah, because on that, because I think Clarence Thomas is the most evil person on the Supreme Court. I have such a disdain at Clarence Thomas. Well, I think most Black America has a problem with Clarence Thomas, because his hypocrisy of I can have my cake and I can eat it too. How he looks at white supremacy, and he backs white supremacy only until it affects him. In some of the courtrooms, and do you think that no, okay, you already said, I was going to ask the next question, was a follow-up question that you said you're going to codify Roe. Okay. Would you support impeaching Clarence Thomas? Because I think there's a lot of people there's some evidence of his conflict of interest in some of his rulings over the last 15 years. Do you think though, would you bring up impeachment charges against him or no?
I will say this, and that's again going back to the conversation I had with Ken Martin, because we're all aligned on policy. Yeah, people want to know how they're going to pay their bills. They want to know what schools they're going to be able to go to, if this bridge is going to be safe, if I'm going to have access to healthcare. The issue is that a lot of people do not understand that when they created the Supreme Court, and you have the Judiciary Act of 1789, you had 6 justices. In 1801, they changed it to 5. 1807, they pushed it up to 7. In 1837, it increased to 9. After the Civil War, it increased to 10. Then they reduced it in 66 to 7. Then in 69, they set it at 9, where it remains today. So it used to expand as the country expanded, but for whatever reason, post-Civil War, as Reconstruction shifted into deconstruction, then they locked it in at 9. So whether that's impeaching or whether that's expanding the court, something has to be done. But going to the conversation that I mentioned with Ken Martin, you're talking about policy and I'm talking about platform and how to accomplish it. We're having 2 different conversations, because I'm not going into my district and telling them that I'm going to bring them affordability, if at the end of the day, again, we're not going to deal with the orange elephant in the room, because some of us have watched Schoolhouse Rock, right? We know how it's law, right? Some of us, like myself, have degrees in this and taught this for 10 years. So even if Ken Martin is sitting here telling me, okay, well, we need to just regain control of Congress, that sounds a heck of a lot like what you told me back in 2020 and going into 2021, when I'm driving 30,000 miles around the country. And it's like, all you got to do is elect Biden and we're going to handle it. And like I pointed out earlier, we didn't get the George Floyd Police Reform Act. We didn't get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would have prevented a lot of the gerrymandering and the tactics we are seeing at voter suppression today. So when you're telling me, okay, well, let's just regain control of Congress in this fall, I hear you. I'm on the same board. But at the same point, we know how a bill becomes a law. It must go through both houses and then go to the president's desk. So let's say we get control of Congress come fall. That means we're going to pass legislation on affordability or healthcare or whatever the case may be. And it's going to go through the House. It's going to go through the Senate because we have control. Then it's going to go to the president's desk and it's going to die. We're going to have control of the agenda and we're going to have these hearings. And I'm going to be on whatever committee I'm going to be on as a freshman in Congress, except you're going to issue subpoenas and those people aren't going to show up. And who's going to prosecute them? The DOJ under Todd Blanche, where Pam Bondi just left. Exactly. They're not going to enforce the subpoenas. So what it sounds like they're propagating as far as the top leadership in the Democratic Party is they're trying to win over and pull themselves to the center to try to win over these disenchanted Republicans, except the disenchanted Republicans that I'm talking to are pissed and they don't want perfect candidates. They want a candidate that they feel is going to fight for them. And they are pissed because their farms are going bankrupt. They are paying $100 to fill up their F-150s and $5 in diesel for their tractors. They lost money in going bankrupt as a result of the Doge cuts in the USAID. They're losing money because of the big, beautiful bill and the fact that people don't realize that the rice and the soybeans and all those things that are staple crops out here in Louisiana, these things were used to pay and were used to either funnel into the SNAP program, or they're being used for these international USAID programs, or you're giving that away to Argentina and other countries, et cetera, et cetera. And you're basically leaving the farmers out. And then you're giving a farmer bailout, except if I'm a farmer, that money in that bailout didn't come to me. It went to the banks that I owed in debt. So I never actually saw that bailout money. And that's not new because that happened the first time. So they believed Donald Trump. And that doesn't even count the Strait of Hormuz being closed, oil being expensive as it is, which also factors into the crops, which also factors because of the fertilization and the fertilizer that comes through the Strait of Hormuz that is a byproduct.
Wow. Yeah, because me being in agriculture, I see beef going up, livestock going up. I see because of course corn and barley, things that we feed animals with is going up dramatically, and people down here where I'm at, they're not doing well.
They're not at all. And that doesn't even count Epstein. They are pissed that the Epstein class is getting these tax breaks while the middle class is getting no tax on tips. Okay, I'm a farmer. That doesn't help me in any way, shape, form, or fashion. You know what I mean? These bailouts aren't helping me in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Meanwhile, he's getting planes. Meanwhile, him and his family are making billions on crypto. Meanwhile, you're destroying, paving over Jackie Kennedy's Rose Garden. Meanwhile, you're destroying the East Wing, the First Lady's wing. You're destroying all of that. Like they are genuinely upset and they don't want perfect candidates. So I'm of the mind, until you deal with Donald Trump and this administration, which my whole thing is ICRIR, impeach, convict, remove, imprison, and then repeat. Impeach, convict, remove, imprison, and then repeat. If you are the kids, I'm telling you, Jay, the kids are telling us. You've heard that the kids are using this phrase 6-7. 6-7, yeah, all that's like the only 67 you need to be worried about is a 67 it takes in the Senate in order to convict and then remove somebody. To be honest, they're telling us without telling us whether they intended it to or not. They are saying it because at the end of the day, you won't be able to reform your way out of this. You need to act with the same revolutionary spirit that they walk in. You need to match that energy. And that's what I feel the Democratic base, the independents and no parties, and even the disenchanted Republicans want. They didn't vote for Donald Trump because he was a perfect candidate. Clearly not. They didn't vote for Donald Trump because they felt like, he was the typical orthodox person. Absolutely not. They want somebody who is like me, who has a track record of fighting for the people, period, that is going to go there and keep it honest with them and tell them exactly what it is. They believe Donald Trump, and now they're coming to terms and reckoning with the fact of, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm watching what you're doing. And like Baldwin says, you don't mess when there's a disconnect between the two of those things. So that's kind of where we are at this point in time. Like whether that's expanding the Supreme Court, or that's holding these folks and going from the president. By that logic, what I'm basically telling you is you could have a Hakeem Jeffries, whether I agree with him being the leader or not. Theoretically, he's the third in line. So if you get rid of Donald Trump, impeach, convict, remove, imprison, repeat. You go down and do J.D. Vance, impeach, convict, remove, imprison, repeat. You go to Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito is another one, if you ask me, that both of these have ethics complications that would justify reforming the Supreme Court and putting ethical guidelines, or not even just putting them in place, but more importantly, just enforcing the ones that they have, where there are financial and other unethical ties with Supreme Court justices that they're not supposed to have, yet they are sitting on the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, without consequence. But they're not being held to account for it, which explains a lot of it. So whether that be impeaching these Supreme Court justices or whatever, there has to be some form of accountability. That's what the disenchanted Republicans want. That's what the independents, no parties want. And that's what the vast majority of Democrats want. That's my interpretation. Whereas the establishment and corporate Democrats, they're still on this. Well, let's just go back to normal. Baby, there is no more normal. We crossed that bridge a long time ago. That ship has sailed, I promise. And up until you start to meet them with the energy that they're bringing to the table, right now we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, it feels like.
Because I think that normal ended when he went down that golden escalator. That's what I think normal ended.
I think normal ended. I can understand the appeal, to be honest. I mean, think about it. Those of us who are old enough to know, the culture has dramatically shifted in the last 40 years I've been walking this earth. Because I remember the 90s. I remember the show The Apprentice. I remember the popularity that Donald Trump has, not just not in the political space, but just on he's branding. He doesn't own the Trump Towers. He throws his name and does a licensing deal, which is why he throws his name on literally everything, on the hats, on the straws, on the Bibles, and all that, because it's all marketing and promotions and propaganda. He is a glorious marketer. And more importantly, he sold the steps of authoritarianism that's even laid out in Mein Kampf. Because if you track the trajectory, and even some of my earlier videos where I'm actually talking about the rise of power of Adolf Hitler, and everybody in the video thought that I was talking about Donald Trump. No, Donald Trump came selling the big lie in 2020. We didn't lose the election. You know what I mean? I'm going to go after the Epsteins and the Epstein class. Yet you don't realize that during that first administration, now that the Epstein files are starting to come out, you're recognizing that at the same time, if you remember that whole Pizzagate scandal where there's a cabal of politicians and influential people who are trafficking children and in this cultish, cannibalistic cult that are, trafficking and eating people and all that. Now, back then, it sounded really, really crazy. And now here we are going 10 years later down the line. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about the cannibalistic cult. But at the end of the day, we are not going to deny right now. None of us are going to deny that there is a cult of sex traffickers going around. But when you look at the Epstein files, then you realize that Pizzagate scandal and all of that started back in the 2015, 2016 era on 4chan, which is like the Reddit for those who don't know. Except you go through the Epstein files and you realize that the time that platform was started, the slash poll starts where Pizzagate originated with QAnon and all of that. You realize that literally started the day that Epstein had a conversation with the head of 4chan himself, with the likes of Steve Bannon pushing it, because that's all it was. It was push all of this, say all of this, go so far. And for the left, they're like, we ignored it. But at the end of the day, his base was all on it. His base was eating it up. We remember the QAnon, and he ran on all of those things, which again, now 10 years later, they're like, well, what do you mean he's in thousands of documents and mentioned more times in the Epstein files than Jesus is in the Bible? What do you mean? And it's like, I'm not going to release all the files because it's going to be damaging to some of my friends. They're pissed about all of this. And it says a lot that people are trying to ignore the fact that just 4 days ago, we're literally paying taxes to pedophiles and their
All right.
protectors.
All right. I'm gonna ask another question though. From how would you protect migrants and immigrants in this country? How would you make them feel safe since we got rogue agents of ICE? How would you protect them and their human rights?
Obviously, this is personal for me because the Latino community here in Louisiana and across the country and around the world have embraced me, which is how I got the nickname La Rubia, which is I'm white, obviously, Scottish and Irish. But when I was younger and living out on the streets, I got into dancing, salsa and bachata. And they were just like, Lindsay, and they're like, who, man, La Rubia with the tattoos on her back. And the blonde chick, you know what I mean? And that's how I got the name. And I've carried that name with pride for over 20 years. I had changed my name to it on social so my students couldn't follow me when I started teaching in the classroom. And then I went viral, and it's kind of like, all right, well, kind of stuck with this name no matter what. Now everybody's going to know me as Rubia. So it's extremely personal for me. I went down to New Orleans when Catahoula Crunch and all that happened in the state, and Swamp Sweep came down, and Chief Bavino came down here and was doing what they were doing, and it was all PR. And then I went to the club that I've been going to for, that entire time, 20 years, and nobody is there. And the businesses was threatened of going under because people weren't showing up because ICE was in the neighborhood and they were afraid that the building and the facility was going to be raided. And that wasn't scary even for the undocumented folks. It was scary for the folks who are American citizens but are Latino, and they were going to get caught up no matter what, because as we have seen, it's like arrest people without due process and then figure it out later. And then the next thing you know, you have American citizens who are sitting in ICE detention for like 6 months before they have an opportunity to really even be heard by a judge or to be released. So it's extremely personal for me. The biggest issue that we have is in what I would do is one, I think it's important to point out that I am for strong borders. So I want, you can't sit here and say I want strong borders, but then not provide a meaningful path to citizenship. And then when these people are doing the right thing and they are following the law and they are going the right way, just because you send out a letter and it's like, okay, we'll come in for your hearing. And then when they show up for their hearing, despite spending thousands of dollars and spending years during this process, then you're going to arrest them and detain them for some simple traffic violation or something that they had, which all of us have as American citizens. And I'm also not willing to sit there and subscribe and say that these are murderers and rapists on the exceptions, when the rule is I am more likely to be shot up by a white dude who has his 5th AR-15 that he got at Bass Pro legally than I am some Latino named Kilmar Obrego Garcia with tattoos on his knuckles. I am more likely to be sexually assaulted and killed by a white man being radicalized on True Social and X than I am some, Trinidad Agua cartel boss that crossed over the border illegally. That's just a fact. And I'm not willing to sit here and negotiate on that. The issue that I feel is that there is no accountability. So post-Civil War, we passed the Civil Rights Act in 71 because the union and the federal government wanted to ensure that there were ways of holding state actors accountable, whether that be the police officers on the ground, state governments, etc., when they're not following the Reconstructionist policies that are going in place. So they put in civil rights statutes in order to enforce it, and not only to hold them criminally, but also civilly accountable. For instance, this is what afforded Derek Chauvin, the families of George Floyd, to go after Derek Chauvin civilly, and to go after the state civilly and the city civilly for actions that were taken by state actors, i.e. Derek Chauvin, who was acting and depriving citizens and people of their constitutional rights under color of law. So Derek Chauvin was acting as a police officer under color of law, and he violated the constitutional rights of George Floyd. So therefore, there are legal mechanisms by which you can go after him both criminally and civilly. Criminally on a federal level would be through the DOJ. civilly, you can file a civil suit for going after him and going after him for violating the constitutional rights. Currently, though, however, there is not a federal mechanism. For instance, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. One of the big pieces of legislation that I want to get done is the Preddy Good Civil Rights Act, which would expand the statute that already exists for state actors and expanding that to include ICE agents, because currently the families of Renee Good and Alex Preddy cannot sue the ICE officers for the actions that they took for violating their constitutional rights, because there isn't a federal statute that exists for them to go after them like there is on the state level for state actors. So that's the biggest piece of legislation, because people where I come from, they understand a couple of things. Pistols and pain is what my brother would say, and that is either physical pain or the threat of impending pain that is going to touch them. And by that way, it is their pocketbooks. So there isn't a mechanism by which you can go after these ICE agents. The whole purpose of civil litigation is to deter conduct. Well, there isn't a mechanism to hold these ICE agents accountable for their unconstitutional conduct, for depriving the rights or impeding on the rights and the constitutional rights of American citizens, or otherwise it just doesn't exist. So the Civil Rights Act that I'm talking about is taking that federal statute that exists for state actors and then expanding that to include the actions of federal agents like ICE.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and my next question is, since Ronald Reagan back in the 80s got rid of the mental health institutions and all that, would you create a fund to get people back into mental health institutions, people who are deprived of sanity, people who are sanity deprived? Would you create something on a federal level to open up reopen the institutions that would give people the mental health that they need?
Mental health is a very personal issue because I have suffered with mental health issues. My dog Justice is an emotional support animal because I suffer with anxiety. A lot of that came after my work on the Hard Rock, after spending as much time and seeing the things that I did, and being the victim of some of the actions of some of these law enforcement agencies while on the front line. It only kind of increased. So mental health is a very personal and big issue for me. That being not just mental health, but also expanding for addiction services and things like that, because I do have members in my family who suffer with addiction. I myself suffered with addiction in my earlier years as a result of my upbringing. So for myself, I find it very crazy that we are literally bombing and blowing up boats in order to prevent drugs from coming into the United States, while at this to prevent the drug epidemic that's going on in the country, while at the same time reducing funding and access to mental health services, which would directly deal with and help those who are suffering from mental health problems and, addiction and things like that. So I would absolutely support legislation that comes down with funding and pushing funding, especially because, like Louisiana, for instance, the one thing we rank number one in is we are the most stressed state in the country. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Financially stressed, healthcare stress, education stress, job opportunity stress. We are stressed across the board, and there are not avenues and facilities and funding in place in order to help our people whenever they are struggling. So anything that deals with mental health is a personal issue for me that I would definitely support.
Okay, and concerning wait, I forgot, I dropped my phone. It was another question I was going to ask about healthcare. Would you back Medicare for all, or what, or do you have any? What's your ideas on the healthcare industry? Would you support Medicaid for all, or some other form of healthcare plan that might be floating around?
I am definitely of the mind that healthcare is a human right. We should not be having the big businesses, corporations, insurance companies, and all that making profit off of. And if you think about it, and I'm trying to Luigi Mangione, the gentleman who killed the healthcare CEO, I if you looked at the comments and when all of that happened, and you had people like Ben Shapiro condoning, which I don't condone violence to any degree. But what you saw in the comments when Ben Shapiro was like, "This is unacceptable. I can't believe the Democrats are supporting this," and then you read the comments and they're like, "I'm a lifelong Republican," and at the end of the day, the sickness and illness and cancer and all that doesn't discriminate along party lines. I believe that healthcare is a human right. We can't be a developed nation, one of the top developed nations, yet we still don't provide healthcare. Healthcare currently is unaffordable. We're removing the subsidies that made it affordable for folks who even get it. That's the result of the big, beautiful bill, with the result of the government shutdown and all of that was for. So I am definitely of the mind, I think we should push to a single payer system. And I definitely would need to, would want to do anything I possibly can in order to give people access to healthcare, because folks out here, we're already penny to post around here. And then on top of that, we do not have the mechanisms currently in order to make it affordable. And it just seems that we're all just like one healthcare crisis away from bankruptcy. Meanwhile, these corporations and these insurance companies are making exorbitant amounts of profits off of sickness and not cures, because it makes no sense for them to cure these issues, not when they can make money off of your sickness. There needs to be an entire overhaul of the healthcare system in the United States. And I am for reinstituting the ACA subsidies in order to make it more affordable, to give more people access to healthcare. We shouldn't be here in 2026 and then I can't afford to take my kids to the doctor. Or as I'm sitting here currently right now, I don't have the money to afford healthcare. So I hope that I don't get sick, and I hope that it isn't anything very serious, because I can't afford the healthcare that it would take in order to treat it.
Okay. And do you have any more time? I hope I'm not.
I got a couple more minutes, maybe 5-10 more minutes.
Okay, good. Here's one question. What is your view? Because I'm of the African American descent here. What is your opinion on the idea of reparations? What's your opinion on reparations and issues like that? Because that's been a online occurring theme in African American circles for the last 5-6 years, and then I saw that been brought up at the Al Sharpton's National Network thing the other day. So, what's your opinion on that?
I will say that we had no problem issuing reparations and financial compensation after the actions in the Japanese internment post World War II, and that was, I don't think a lot of people realize that that's also one of the people that I highlight in my book is Yuri Kochiyama, who walked toe to toe with Malcolm X. She's actually in the picture of, she was there the day that Malcolm X was assassinated, and there is actually a picture of her, at the head of Malcolm X, because they believed in walking in solidarity with one another, that there was unity and that there was power in that type of consolidating and putting people of the like minds. And she pushed for reparations, and she pushed for unity, the same type that the Japanese Americans were entitled to post World War II for Japanese internment. I believe it's a conversation that needs to be had, because as we started out this conversation, I believe that the biggest curse, I guess we could say, while people are trying to claim that we're in a post-racial society, I find it to be very crazy for people to sit there and say that, while at the same time, it is very obvious that certain actions that they are taking in regards to, for instance, Calvin Duncan here in this back home in New Orleans in Louisiana, the actions that they are taking, where it's finding hard to believe that it's anything else other than retaliation and race-based targeting, because this black man spent almost 30 years in prison. Then he got out. He didn't have access to his records. He pled, and then he got out. Then a law was passed so that he could go in and prove himself factually innocent. He did that. And then a couple of years later, he decided to run for clerk of Orleans Parish Criminal District Court.
I saw that the other, I think Roland Martin did a video on that. Yeah. I think it
I
was
suggest reaching out to Calvin yourself, and
okay.
because I don't want to speak for Calvin. He's a very articulate man, and I know my lane as an ally, as an accomplice, but it's very hard to believe that it's anything else other than what it is, because if it wasn't targeted towards him, then how is it that everybody else who was elected in that and the other legislation allows everybody else to carry out their terms, but Calvin, for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, now he's being kicked back and his seat is being eliminated. That was the video that I did that's gone viral this week, because I went out there to the Louisiana legislature and I put them all on notice that I'm sick of it. I hope that is the message. If anything was conveyed, I am sick of y'all sitting here pretending about that. And to the reparations part, and going back to the point, up until the United States reckons with the hypocritical stance of saying all men are created equal, and then saying that blacks are 3/5 of a person in Article 1 of the Constitution, up until we reconcile this component, and knowing that it wasn't until another 100 years later that the Civil War ends, and then we're passing the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, as if those things, we're not having a conversation about equality, we're having a conversation about equity. And I'm open to whatever discussions that may be, whether that be looking like reparations, whether it's financial compensation, whether what all that is. And that's kind of the point that I made to the current mayor of New Orleans, Helena Moreno, whenever the conversations about Palestine were coming up. And the city of New Orleans drafted a statement for peace, yet they sat down at the table with the Jewish Federation, and only the Jewish Federation, and excluded intentionally Palestinian voices for the conversation. Well, that to me sounds like I'm going to talk about reparations, but I'm going to invite the KKK to the group, and then I'm only going to talk to them.
Right.
And how are we going to sit here if we're not going to put everybody? And that's not to say that the Jewish Federation is the KKK, but at the end of the day, how are you going to exclude the voices of those who were the victims of the actions from this statement of peace, or from the progress that we're all looking forward to move forward on? How are you going to push that? How are you going to have this conversation and have a genuine good faith conversation about it, with not having? I'm open to it as a white woman, but I consider myself not just an ally, but an accomplice. I don't think it's my space to sit here and tell black people what they feel would be necessary in order to compensate you, rightfully so, for the actions of the United States 250 years ago, 150 years ago, 100 years ago. I'm open to whatever conversations that can be put on the table for us to bring us to a point of it, and to have the conversations about the equity and not just the equality that we're at right now. And the best way I heard it put, and I'm trying to remember her name, but I watched a video back in 2020, and she was like, it's like playing a game of Monopoly. And as a white woman, I was allowed to pass go, collect $200 for 100, 150 years, etc. But then I wasn't allowed black people at the same point for the first 100 years, 150, 200 years, were kept at go the entire time. You weren't allowed to get houses and buy houses on the board when you wanted. You couldn't get the boardwalks and the park places and the railroads, et cetera, et cetera. You weren't allowed to pass go and collect $200 by way of redlining, et cetera, et cetera. And therein lies the conversation that needs to be had on the difference between equality, like we're all having the same opportunities now, versus, and that's even debatable in and of itself, but whether or not we're talking about equality, where everybody's on the same footing, versus equity, meaning you sat at that go for so long. How do we bring you up to the same opportunities that white folks had up until this point? How do we get an equal footing? And I don't know how necessarily to accomplish that without having a serious conversation about reparations. So, like I said, I'm open to whatever conversations that we can have.
I know our time's limited, but let me have my little ideas to shout out to you.
Mm-hmm.
I have an idea of an infrastructure bank that would which will give out dividends to every man, woman, and child who are of descendants of slaves, African Americans. But that I know it's all yeah, I don't want to give all the details because short. We have short time and everything. But let me go ahead and conclude asking how I knew of you. I knew of you from YouTube about 10 years ago. Um, one of them was about your dance competition in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think they think that he was your husband at the time.
Nope.
Um,
If you're talking about Dejan
yeah,
is
that's it.
Black
Yeah.
and Dominican. He was my dance partner at the time. Wasn't my husband. My husband was Latino, but he was Honduran and Honduran Latino. But by the
Uh-huh.
time I've been dancing for 20 years. So I've been to the Texas Salsa Congress literally since like 2005. So that was the first time I went out there. But like my first, when I actually started really, before I was just traveling to perform versus fast forward 10 years after I got married, after I had kids, and then I got back into dancing after my divorce, where I had so many dues to pay. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go out to the culture, like I wanted to learn bachata. So after Katrina, I moved out to the Dominican Republic. Shout out to Santo Domingo. I went out to the Dominican Republic to learn bachata from where it came from. I wanted to learn the music. I wanted to learn the culture. And you can't substitute that in the classroom versus learning on the streets at the bodega down on the corner. So I spent that kind of 10 years just kind of investing. And then, yes, I got married and had kids. And then that didn't necessarily work out. But when I stepped back into the space, during that time, I had started teaching, and not just teaching in the classroom, but also teaching to build up the Latin dance community that when I was younger really saved my life. It got me off of drugs. It got me off of the street. It gave me a family, even though my family was rather large. Um, there is the covenant. The blood of the water is thicker than the covenant of the womb. People are always like blood is thicker than water. That's not the right Irish or Scottish phrases. The Scottish phrase is actually the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, meaning the choices and the bonds that we make throughout life are more strong because there's not an obligation there. It's the bonds that you choose with those who are in solidarity with your values, et cetera, versus the ones that you are born into because y'all share the same wound and the blood that you have. That is the solidarity that I stand with. So by that time, I was putting myself on any stage. I was going to any Congress. I would go literally teach anywhere, perform anywhere because I wanted to put New Orleans on the map. So that way I could bring that culture to New Orleans and have the New Orleans Salsa Bachata Festival, which we started in 2017, where I could bring professional dancers in and bring thousands of my dancer friends from around the country to come in and train and learn and have fun and experience New Orleans and the food and the culture and be able to come out here. So yeah, I do miss dancing. I haven't danced when the Hard Rock fell, and then COVID hit. A lot of my life changed, and I still have people that are like, "Oh, I miss you dancing, baby." I miss dancing too, but it's me feeling like the work that I'm doing now is a lot of my life. I was bullied a lot for, things growing up, family connections, et cetera, poor decisions that I had made. And I became the bully's bully. Like, you're
Right.
not going
Right.
to hurt these people because they're vulnerable. You're going to have to go through me type energy.
Right.
Um, and that's kind of how I feel right now. Like, I miss dancing, but I believe I have privileges. And this is the best way I know to flex my privilege for progress is to act as the bully's bully and the defender of them and to stand in the gap because you're going to have to go through me in order to get to my people. So I miss dancing. I miss teaching. I miss performing. I miss going to congresses. I miss mi familia, but at this point, what's more important, me teaching some cross body leads or me getting into Congress to make sure that we can host these congresses and these events without the threat of ICE coming in and raiding our event and rounding everybody up.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, I miss it.
Well,
I do.
well. I wish I had some more time because I know your time's limited, and I appreciate you for being here, Ruba. And yeah. Like I said, I remember you on YouTube. There was a hair controversy back then about
Oh
those
yeah.
braids. Yeah, yeah. That whole that's how I first knew of you.
I
Back
learned
then.
so
So
much from that experience, and I think that people look at that, and I look at it. it comes up on Google searches, and even I cringe because, but I'm so grateful looking back at it now. I'm actually really grateful for that experience because it taught me about white fragility, my own white fragility, and how I responded. It was much bigger than me. You know, even though I grew up in New Orleans, even though I've been having my hair braided literally since Miss Sheila's been doing my hair at the barbershop literally since I was in high school. And I used to braid my hair all the time for sports, and as a protective way of keeping my hair out of my face and protecting my hair, et cetera, et cetera. But it was obviously much bigger. So what was said, I responded as if it was me personally, and it was actually much, much bigger. So while I know that that's probably going to come up along the line, and that's completely honest, to be fair, but I wouldn't undo that, because from that I learned about white fragility, like I said, but also you can't cancel my humanity. And along
Right,
this
right.
journey and growth, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. I'm going to do the biggest thing is that even though I'm a teacher,
Well,
I'm still teachable.
I think though that what happened to you was unfair. I really think that when they came after you, it was unfair. And plus, though, you had people who were African American who was in your comment section. I think this was on that YouTube channel. They were like cool with you with that hair, because I mean, why are we arguing about hair and we got issues that was bigger than you know, I think it was. I think arguments like that was superficial, because it really was not really necessary to come at you like that. I thought that was wrong, and it was very, very unfair on that part.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I, honest to God, that's one of the reasons, another reason why I'm running for Congress, because it's like, I know I'm going to be canceled. There are so many, to be completely honest and transparent with you, growing up in New Orleans, and once people like find out more about my family, it's not an excuse. It's more like an understanding. But I used to use the N word, not with the ER, but with the A. But that's not to say that either one of them are fine. But it was a part of my dialect, because everybody around me growing up, I didn't understand. You know what I mean? There was so much, and then up until I have a conversation, and then it's like, all right, cool. And this is long before that, right? So it's not that big of a deal to remove any of that from my conversation or my dialect, because I understand even that incident right there taught me so much. And whereas like I do understand what you're saying, because I read the comments, and it's kind of like, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. If I keep putting the braids in my hair, then I'm going to piss off some certain people. And if I don't do the braids, then some people will be like, well, why are you letting them get to you? Because whatever. And at the end of the day, like I said, I responded from fragility, because it wasn't just about me. I had people in my life that had poured into me, which is primarily Black women on my life, who poured into me. And I felt my biggest concern, the craziest part was, I never promote like hair, and I never promoted any of that. And what that actually started from was Miss Sheila over there at Innovative. And I never even really said this out loud. And I've never had a chance to really like talk about it and have it brought up. But where it stemmed from was, I posted a video of myself promoting Miss Sheila at Innovative. And where that comes from was actually me just stopping by the barbershop one day. I wasn't intending to get my hair braided, but Miss Sheila was going through a tough time. And Miss Sheila is not the type to take money. Like even if it's like $100 or whatever, she's not the type to take money, but she will work for it. So I was like, boom, I'm gonna go down there. I'm gonna go buy some hair. I'm gonna come back and get my hair braided, because she wants to work for it. All right, cool. So I did that. And while she's doing my hair, would you mind me, doing a video and shouting you out? And she was like, heck yeah, sure. Because she wants to work for it. Right. So then I do a quick little video, go holla at Miss Sheila at Innovative. And then the next thing you know, it's, this is a direct quote, I'll never forget it. Bitch, I hope your oily ass gets lice. I was like, okay, all right. And then I saw what it was. One, it was, I didn't want Miss Sheila to get caught up. And I reached out to her like after all, like while all that was going on. And I was like, are you okay? Like, is everything? And she's like, girl, I've gotten so much business. And I'm like, all right, cool. I don't even care then. If that's the case, then cool. But I didn't want there to be a negative impact on the people that I love, or the people that were supporting me. And Miss Sheila, I respect her more than my own mama. So it's like, I didn't want anything negative and no negative consequences to come back on her. So I wasn't really worry necessarily about the consequences that I faced, because I walked into that, and more importantly, I responded from emotion and not from hearing it out, and responded from that personal space rather than, you know, trying to hear what this woman was saying. And I didn't even disagree with some of the things that she was saying whenever she called me out on it. And then what made me even more mad was they put her video on World Star Hip Hop, and then they called her a racist black woman. And I'm like, hold on, time out. Like, it went too far. And then I saw people of a community that I love, that had poured into me for so long, going back and forth at my behalf. And that's kind of why I was like, all right, time out, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that wasn't my intention, but it really did break my heart to see people on both sides of the aisle of that issue going back and forth against one another, and it was my fault. So why I get where people say it's unfair, but at the end of the day, I understand all sides of the argument just from an objective point of view of where it comes from and where it stems from, and that it was just much bigger. And I wouldn't undo any of that, because it taught me so much about myself. It taught me so much about the fragility component. It taught me to think how to respond to things, and that there are certain people who will do something just for a response. Not to say that she was, but there are people who will say certain things and do certain things in order to do it. And I did see the people who were supporting, but at the end of the day, one of the points from memory, what she said was, you're sitting here defending a white woman that, 50, 60 years ago would have had you, strung up somewhere. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know how to combat that, because I don't know where I was, where I would have been 50. I know where I stand right now, but I don't know where I would have been 50, 60 years ago. And I don't know how to necessarily combat that. And I'm not saying anything that people, black women like her, haven't been saying. So I can understand it, and I can appreciate it. And I felt some type of way that, people of the community, on both sides, there were those who didn't like it. There were those who did. And at the end of the day, I felt really messed up that, there were members of the black community that were going at one another at my behest. I'm like, I think that's probably the thing that bugged me the most. But that's one of the reasons why I just sat back for a good while and I just listened, and I actively listened to what was being said, which taught me so much about cancel culture, which taught me so much about fragility, which taught me so much about responding with emotion and not responding from a centered place and getting my message across, et cetera, et cetera. I just learned a lot, and this, the cancel culture in general, like I said, like, you can't cancel my humanity. I've done microaggressive things and unwittingly, and up until somebody points it out and was like, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I really didn't mean it, but I didn't even think, because my privilege has afforded me the luxury of never having to consider that. So I'm appreciative of that time in my life. And that's almost 10 years ago at this point, but I'm so appreciative of that point, which is kind of why I kind of take it all with grace, and I just look at both sides and be like, you know what? I can understand if you feel some type of way about it. I could feel and understand if you don't feel some type of way, or you felt like that part was unfair. But as far as where I stand, there's nothing but gratitude, because it was just another learning experience for me. And I hope that I get the grace in the future that whenever I do put my foot in my mouth or say something, that I still have the people in my corner to be like, all right, Lance, like, this is what is trying to be said versus what you're responding to. And you need to understand the difference. That's, for me, it was the best thing for me to be able to have those people in my life to be able to pour into me.
All right, then. Right. Well, okay. Well, I appreciate you, Miss Garcia, for coming over, and and I hope you make it. And when is the primary? It's in May, right?
Yes, on May 16th, it's me going up against the other 4 Democratic candidates, and then whoever the people District 5 choose is going to be going to November against who the Republicans choose at the same time.
Okay. All right then. All right, Miss Rubia. Well, I
Rubia,
appreciate.
yep.
Rubia. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I appreciate it for you coming by, and hopefully we'll cross paths again at a later time after you win. So
Same. Love it.
all right
Appreciate
then.
you. Thank you so much, Jay.
All right then. You have a good one.
You too.
All right then. All right, though. This concludes my interview, y'all, and I'll see y'all next time. I got another interview coming from somebody from the state of Oklahoma. I'll see you then. Big J out.